Welcome back, Looking Glass Forum. We're starting our next podcast episode here, and of course, there's nothing else really to talk about in the current news headlines other than the explosive Jeffrey Epstein files that are blowing out across the cyber landscape. And the internet is of course white hot with the issues of the Jeffrey Epstein files that we see coming out. And of course, you have to kind of search for it. A lot of these new media platforms are totally ignoring it like nothing is happening. It's kind of strange. It's like a bizarre cognitive dissonance. You can actually see it in a visible and exposed way as these people try to not talk about the thing that everyone is discussing. Everyone is going through the Epstein files and finding out these incredible and extraordinary details about the way that the system of global empire and the New World Order has been working for all these centuries. And of course, this is a vindication of, quote unquote, conspiracy theorists out there. And of course, we're going to discuss the info wars. It's strange that the info wars is being taken down right now, right at this time when this whole thing is coming out. Of course, they didn't take Alex Jones down fast enough because he's able to come out and discuss a lot of this information just as they're beginning to take his platform down, and he's going to have to obviously reset, right? And he's going to have to go ahead and put a new platform in place. And of course, you can see that there's a little bit of a disconnect in the info wars here. You can see that there's a little bit of a discontinuity about what's going on, and of course, we will do our best to straighten that out. So we're going to go through a bunch of clips here. And we're going to discuss how the entire system for elite globalism has been a corrupt system of perversion and depravity all along. And you can see here that a lot of the individuals who are not being discussed in the Epstein files, I think that people don't really have a vocabulary or a historical understanding or the intellectual acumen to really kind of comprehend the system that's in place here, the power structure. And of course, you can see that a lot of the individuals like the Queen of the Netherlands, Queen Beatrix. You can see that princes and royalty, the nobility of Europe, the papal nobility, are deeply implicated here in the Epstein files. And of course, the whole trajectory of this criticism is going to come out. We've been talking about for quite some time. This is going to be a process of denigrating the Jews, right? This is going to be the whole point. This is going to be the entire scope of the blackmail apparatus, the system of criminally implicating elites and wealthy hedge fund executives and Silicon Valley tech oligarchs, right? The whole process of the banking lords, right? Getting them all involved in a system of bribery and blackmail by bringing them into this compromise, right? So they're compromised with whatever sexual proclivity or whatever kind of dirty laundry it is that there's their preference, finding out what it is they like, right? What kind of perverted habits do they have that the individuals like Jeffrey Epstein can provide for them, the accoutrements of their pleasure, and then of course going about the process of blackmailing them and getting them involved in a situation where they could be on video, they could be recorded. And you can see a lot of people in American politics, the atom shifts, various individuals on the right and the left are going to be implicated in this particular scheme that we're going to see here. And of course, you can see that Epstein is a Rothschild's representative, right? He's a representative of the Rothschild powers elite. And we've maintained for a long time that the banking clerks of the Rothschilds, who are very wealthy, they have banks with billions and billions of dollars. And our contention is simply that the Rothschilds are an elite banking family, but they're just not as many suppose, the most powerful and the richest family in the world, just like AI or Grok or some internet conjecture will say that there are, of course, if you're the most powerful individuals in the world, then you would be able to maintain your anonymity. You would have individuals who work for you, who are the face and the name and the outward-facing servants of the truly unaccountable elite. And so you can see that individuals like the Rothschilds are just people you can see on the surface that have been used for a long time, for a century or more, to be the face and the name of the banking system. And of course, they're very wealthy and they've achieved some nobility status within the various royal families of Europe, most famously in England. Lord Rothschild, right, got a little bit of nobility, a little noble status by indebting the kings and the princes of England to their banking enterprise.
Here, a new batch of Epstein co-conspirators have finally been named thanks to the work of Congressman Ro Khanna and Congressman Thomas Massie. Ro Khanna just took to the floor of the House of Representatives and blasted the DOJ for clearly trying to hide these names. Watch.
Mr. Speaker, Yesterday, Congressman Massey and I went to the Department of Justice to read the unredacted Epstein files. We spent about 2 hours there, and we learned that 70 to 80% of the files are still redacted. In fact, there were 6 wealthy, powerful men that the DOJ hid for no apparent reason. When Congressman Massey and I pointed this out to the Department of Justice, they acknowledged their mistake, and now they have revealed the identity of these 6 powerful men. These men are Salvatore Navora, Zorab Mikoladze, Leopig Leonor, Nicola Caputa, Sultan Ahmed bin Sulayem, CEO of Dubai Ports World, and billionaire businessman Leslie Wexner, who was labeled as a co-conspirator by the FBI. Now, my question is, why did it take Thomas Massey and me going to the Justice Department to get these 6 men's identities to become public? And if we found 6 men that they were hiding in 2 hours, imagine how many men they are covering up for in those 3 million files.
Bingo. Now, maybe we should point out, here are the names again: Salvatore Nora, Zorab Mikoladze, Leonev, Nicola Caputo, Sultan Ahmed bin Sulayman. Of course, we're going to talk more about him on Thursday here on the show and do more of a deep dive. Billionaire businessman Leslie Wexner. But just on the Leslie Wexner part, named as a co-conspirator here.
Now, Wexner, you may have known, was Epstein's main financier. He gave him one of the largest apartments in New York City. Epstein had full power of attorney over all of Wexner's assets, and he is a billionaire, continues to be. He's one of the founders of Bed Bath & Beyond and a founder of Victoria's Secret and La Senza, one other I'm missing right now. So he amasses great amount of fortune, and Epstein, having very little experience in personal finance, becomes his main guy. Now, we have known this since at least 2008, when Epstein was deposed and the lawyers who represented the victims asked about Wexner. We've known that since way before that. The question is, why did the DOJ never have him testify? Why was he never interviewed? All we can see from the files is that he was deposed 2 weeks before Epstein died. And then, Epstein's dead. I guess we don't have to do this anymore. And we don't know. Now we know that the DOJ all along has labeled Wexner a co-conspirator. So what did they do with that? Did they investigate him? Did they ever go? They never raided his house, as far as we know. They never impaneled a grand jury, as far as we know, unless it was sealed indictments. We don't know. Why has he been protected all along? Why does he go free? What happened after he replaced Epstein with somebody else? Did that other guy, we talked about him yesterday, did he do anything? We don't know. What we do know is that he is a prominent donor to Israeli causes. He is a Jewish businessman. We do know that he had alliances with Ehud Barak, the former prime minister. We do know that Benjamin Netanyahu's son once called Wexner a cult of pedophiles because he said that he was aligned with the far left in Israel. And then Netanyahu obviously is the right-wing version of Israeli politics. He has said that Wexner has been trying to influence Israeli politics for decades, and that appears to be true with his donations. So who protected him? Why did we never, if the DOJ all along has labeled him a co-conspirator, why has he been left alone? Also, a strange bit is that he went on to buy the Martha's Vineyard home that the Obamas had rented. What is that connection? These are very serious questions that we never got answered. And yet, when we have been screaming about Lex Wexner for over a decade, the DOJ said nothing. And we now know they did, in fact, label him a co-conspirator. So that's major. That we knew it. We've been screaming his name forever. And now they're like, yeah, we've been on that one. So we're like, and then?
But of course, you got to recognize that the process of lending individuals money, especially nobility, individuals with the royal peerages, noble titles, right? The banking houses are really just servants of their customers, right? Not the other way around. So a lot of the money that was in the Rothschild treasuries, the Rothschild coffers, if you will, is going to be the Vatican accounts. And so that's something we can prove without very much difficulty, is that the if you're a wealthy aristocracy, you don't want to spend time managing your own banking accounts, right? You have banking servants, banking clerks that help you manage your funds for you. And that's what the Rothschilds represent. They represent servants and not the masters. And so when people just bring you back to this kind of Rothschild world conspiracy, it's kind of low level, low information, uninformed, surface details, so don't take you into the deeper level structure of what's really happening. And of course, what they're really trying to protect here, and we'll show that as we go forward in our episode, what they're really trying to protect is the system of Romanism. So Rome is the truly unaccountable power structure of the ultra wealthy elite, and they have surrogates, they have Jewish servants that serve them, and they do a good job, and the point of them is to run cover, right? So that whenever the exposure comes, like what you see here with the Epstein files, the people who are most damaged in the exposure are, of course, Jewish faces and names. And not to say that you don't have a system of Jewish supremacy out there, you don't have the B'nai B'rith, or you don't have certain secret societies of Jewish men who are there to try to expand their power and try to grow their influence within the global system. But of course, what we're saying is that the power structure, the advanced prerogatives of those who hold the true power in this equation are those who remain unnamed and who are not easily made visible in the open exposure to the public. And so they remain hidden and they remain carefully insulated, because that's how this whole thing is layered. The whole structure is layered in such a way so that those who are handling and working in the apparatus, who are functionaries, who are the actuaries, who do the mill work of managing the blackmail and the circumstances of the intel operations and the day-to-day tasking and the dirty work of the power structure, are those who are just the henchmen, right? So these, just as the InfoWars crew is going to talk about here, they are ultimately the servants of this system, and they are not the masters, right? So the masters of this system remain kind of out of reach, and so you can see some of them being brought into the picture here. You can see, we can discuss the images of Queen Beatrix, who has her bejeweled pizza brooch, right? She has her little brooch on her dress there with the pizza symbols. And of course, you can see that many of the customers of Jeffrey Epstein are going to be these papal nobility, people who are just wanting to pay for the services and are the customers of this kind of human sex slave pedophilia operation. Just like the Rothschilds, Epstein is ultimately the servant and the clerk and the do-boy of the power elite. And so that's what you see here. Ultimately, this whole thing is going to be hung like an albatross and tied like a bow around the necks of the Jewish people, because there are going to be some individuals, Jewish men, who are just heinous cretins. They're disreputable, insidious trash. And the fact that they're Jewish men who have, whose bloodline is from a biblical history, and they have a covenant with God, it doesn't save them, right? The requirement of God is that you be holy and that you be blameless and be righteous and a protector of children and women and harmless when it comes to having some kind of soul. And so a lot of these guys are soulless voids, right? They just have no consciousness at all, and no conscience at all, and have served this power structure and turned human beings into so much raw meat.
Well, also, it's worth pointing out that Kash Patel was lying when he said this about co-conspirators. Watch.
There's no credible information. None. If there were, I would bring the case yesterday that he trafficked to other individuals. And the information we have, again, is limited.
So the answer is no one?
For the information that we have.
In the files?
In the case file.
Okay.
Now, we don't know that Wexner was trafficked to. We don't know that he trafficked from. What we know is that Epstein had a source, very mysterious source of massive amount of wealth that allowed him to have these different layers around the world. And it is improbable that Lex Wexner did not know about it. Now, people have made the connection. Victoria's Secret is a place to go and get young girls, people who want to get into the funnel of Victoria's Secret models. What happened there? These are valid questions.
Well, and yes, Whitney Webb, who's been a guest on our show, she's been covering the Les Wexner piece of this story for years here on Redacted. This goes back many, many years, and she called it out. So she knew about it. If she knew about it, why was the DOJ hiding it? A very good question from Ro Khanna. Meanwhile, more calls for Howard Lutnick to resign today from the Trump's cabinet as Commerce Secretary or be impeached. So Howard Lutnick said recently in an interview that in 2005, his 2005 visit to Jeffrey Epstein's home left him so revolted that he cut ties with Epstein. But today, in front of Congress, now that the Epstein files have been released, he had to totally revise his bullshit story. Watch.
Lutnick, I think you understand the root of concern here. It's the way you described very emphatically your first encounter with him in his apartment, said you were disgusted, would never have any contact with him again. Did you, in fact, make the visit to Jeffrey Epstein's private island?
I did have lunch with him as I was on a boat going across on a family vacation. My wife was with me, as were my 4 children and nannies. I had another couple they were there as well with their children, and we had lunch on the island. That is true, for an hour, and we left with all of my children, with my nannies and my wife, all together. We were on family vacation. We were not apart. To suggest there was anything untoward about that in 2012, I don't recall why we did it, but
Mr. Secretary, again, as I said, there.
Yeah.
You don't recall. The emails make it clear why he did it. He set it up purposefully and gave all the ages of the teenagers.
So yes, the new emails show that Lutnick remained in contact for years afterward, including a 2012 email discussing a visit to Epstein's island and a trip and a lunch with Epstein and his own children. By the way, as Chili Pepper in our chat room says on YouTube, says over 30% of the people killed in the Twin Towers worked for Howard Lutnick. He didn't go to work that day. He then profited off of the event and supported Israeli initiatives.
I don't think I knew that.
Yeah, well.
Thank you for that. Let's follow that trail.
Yeah, I mean, he's been interviewed many, many times about how devastating it was to lose all of his employees and all of that, obviously. So, but yes, I mean, exactly, was he being covered here and protected? So, and then reporters today, of course, swarmed him after his testimony, and he's just smiling and sort of grinning ear to ear as he's being pressed about, why did you lie, and why were you continuing to hang out with a convicted sex offender?
Now, if you haven't seen the movie Eyes Wide Shut, I'm not suggesting you go and do that. It's about elite sex rituals that are meant to solidify hierarchy, power, and control. When the film was released, it was dismissed as kind of boring and unrealistic. Now, in light of the Epstein files, it reads as psychologically accurate, honest, and maybe even restrained. The film's director, Stanley Kubrick, died after he made the final edits, so he was never able to be asked about it. So the question is, why did Hollywood elites allow this film to be shown? What are we seeing here? How do we know? What are we looking at? So, Jay Dyer, welcome back to Redacted. Thank you so much for joining us. You wrote this on X the other day, and I thought we would have you explain it. You said, this is real. It puts the famous Rothschild's mask ball photos in a new light. This has been going on for a long time. So I'm just going to hand you the floor and explain to us what the hell.
Yeah, thank you. Glad to be back with you guys. Yeah, I wrote a really in-depth analysis of Eyes Wide Shut, kind of a academic style essay maybe in 2011, and I got quite a bit of attention from it because people started noticing, hey, you know, this aspect of the ritual, this aspect of the tie into Hollywood, there's actually history behind a lot of this. And Kubrick, as a somewhat of a counter establishment figure, was putting a lot of messages into his films. And so I was studying film at a graduate level as well in terms of propaganda at the same time. So the deeper I dove into this, I started realizing that in the academic literature, which most people don't actually read, not that they would, I mean, it's just for a bunch of nerds, they started coming out with books 10, 15 years ago about the relationship of the CIA to Hollywood at an academic level, right? So normal people aren't reading this. This isn't really in the media. You had, even right after 9/11, there was academic texts like Operation Hollywood. And what these books were describing was this intimate relationship between high-level A-listers, producers, directors, the Pentagon, the NSA, the FBI, as well as other foreign intelligence agencies, obviously the Mossad and British intelligence. And so turns out there's always been this really close relationship between film, propaganda, the deep state, intelligence agencies, and it turns out sex cults. And so I thought that Kubrick's film was just so profound in that it ties in all of that stuff together, because if you don't recall, or if you're not aware, the narrative of the story is that Tom Cruise is this sort of, wealthy, mid-level New York elite doctor who gets invited to a very, say, higher tier billionaire level party. And the invitation is sort of mysterious. We don't exactly know if he's supposed to be there, if he's not supposed to be there. But what he stumbles upon is essentially there's a tier of people above him that are engaged in international or ritual sex type stuff, including murders, assassinations, probably suggesting other things, with the Lily Sobieski character being underage trafficking of girls and so forth. And there's even a curious line in the film where when the Tom Cruise character goes to the costume store and he says, "What do I need for a masked ball, a Renaissance style masked ball?" And the owner of the costume store, who's a trafficker himself connected to the network, they say, "You're going to need this special cloak." And so that is a cloak worn specifically by royals in Europe and in the UK. And so when Tom Cruise stumbles upon this and gets to this big event here, he sees this mass ritual orgy. It's a black mass, essentially. It's very Crowleyan in terms of Aleister Crowley style rituals. And ultimately, we find out this is a network that is compromising and is essentially controlling the wealthiest people, in this case in New York, probably the East Coast as well. The guy has a British accent that sort of runs the cult, the Hierophant. So long story short, I think the phrase "eyes wide shut" is essentially describing the fact that back in the late 90s when Kubrick did this film, most people's eyes were wide shut. They were open, but they're shut to how the world really works, which is what this film is about. And if you go back to my book, the very first chapter, I talked about how this is describing the strategy and the techniques of the Rothschild mass balls. Yeah, so the mass ball essentially was I think, a perfect setup for how you could compromise people. And that's kind of what we get with Tom Cruise and his character in this sequence, is that he's brought in, he's perhaps being inducted, it's unclear, but he's definitely in the position of being compromised. And we notice throughout the film's narrative that this cult has all of the powers and abilities of an intelligence agency at their disposal. They're able to fake the news stories, they're able to assassinate, right? And there's this cult element where the other model who takes the place of Tom Cruise says, "Don't kill him, I will be the sacrifice for him, I will redeem him." And that has to do with earlier in the film, because Tom Cruise's character is a doctor. He saved her life at that first party. So look, this is high-level stuff. This is telling us everything about how the world really works. It's based on an older German novel called Traumnovelle. And I think that novel was updated by Kubrick on purpose to tell us they're really into this underage stuff. And that's also a theme in many Kubrick films. Lolita, Barry Lyndon, on and on and on. Dr. Strangelove, you have this idea that the elite want younger people to abuse, to traumatize, and they run the world through these cult networks.
So I want to get into Stanley Kubrick in a second, because, I've studied his films for years, and when I went to film school back in the day, I want to get into that piece of this and his mysterious death, and of course the edit that we never got to see. So just put that on the back burner for a second. But you mentioned the Rothschild's balls. Forgive the way of saying it.
Well, he has pictures. If we could put them up, they're incredibly
Don't put
creepy.
pictures of their balls up.
Yeah, don't put the Rothschild's balls up. I don't want to see those things. But
let's call them galas.
Yeah, let's call them galas. So, Jay, what happens at these galas? What exactly are we looking at here, and what is the history of these things?
These are older images from the 60s and 70s where they were inviting very prominent people. In fact, some of the pictures include people like Audrey Hepburn being at these balls. And, this is, I think, an old European tradition. So the ball itself is nothing new. I've done research in my grad studies on Renaissance era mass balls. And what the elite would do is you bring all these people to these sort of Saturnalian parties where you have orgies, shall we say. And that goes back to, like I said, medieval Europe. And for a long time, it could be a very excellent, it's a perfect setting to compromise people. So if you go into the history of sexual blackmail and these kinds of operations, the Rothschilds were at the front of this for many, many centuries. In fact, in terms of Epstein himself, the Robert Maxwell was a front for the Rothschild operation, and I think you guys have talked to Whitney Webb. The first few chapters of her book detail how Maxwell was brought in as a frontispiece, a kind of a facade for the Rothschilds to be a corporate takeover artist, to be this publishing magnate that was a front to cut out. And that was all at the behest of both British intelligence and Israel as well at the same time. So the Rothschilds seem to really be perfect at this. It's a science that they perfected. In fact, there's some information and indications. People have written some books theorizing that if you go back to the Cambridge spy ring and the famous story of the Soviets that defected, many of whom were, by the way, homosexual, the reason that matters is because they were very close to Lord Victor Rothschild, who many people suspect was the key a person behind that Cambridge spy ring, because he was playing both sides, both British intelligence and playing the side of the Soviets. And there was that famous email that came out from Epstein a few days ago explaining that, well, the reason that Maxwell was assassinated was because he tried to extort the Mossad, whom he worked for, appointing himself as an attaché for Israel to the Soviets. And the KGB actually had translations that my friend did where they were, during the Cold War, they had the exact same assessment of Maxwell. He's playing both sides. He's trying to feed us secrets as he's trying to extort the Mossad. And that was supposedly, according to Epstein, the reason why they took him out. Now, the reason I say all that is that, again, this is, as Epstein himself says, a Rothschild operation. He is a agent, an attaché, a legate of the Rothschilds. Many emails confirm this, including business deals beyond just being a legate.
That's right. It's another word from our awesome sponsor, Wendy'sLimited.com. Wendy'sLimited.com is the hottest new styles in the fashion industry. You got to go check out Wendy'sLimited.com. And of course, Wendy's Boutique Limited is not sucked into all the vino and brainwash of the leftist political culture out there. We know what a woman is, and we're here to serve women. We're not here to be deceived by fake-looking dudes, but dressed like women, right? No offense. And we're here to remind you that Wendy'sLimited.com is the leader in online boutique fashion design. We have our best selection of boutique couture, awesome designer trends, and the hottest limited catalog fashion anywhere. You got to come check out Wendy'sLimited.com. Our sponsor has been very generous and keeps us going here, so please come and check out the craze, Wendy'sLimited.com. And so, yeah, the whole exposure of the Epstein files is really just disturbing, and it's not for children. And you know, this is a horrifying exhibition of what the moneyed powers, what the global elite get up to, and how they spend their time and their money, and how devoid of any kind of empathy or humanity they really are. And you can see individuals like the Clintons, right? These are all individuals who are ultimately expendable, right? The Clintons, all these Bill Gates, right? These are nobodies. And in our kind of way of looking at it, they seem like that they're billionaires. They seem like they're power players. They seem like they're very wealthy patricians of the global classes, the global system. But ultimately, these guys are just nobodies, right? These guys are just servants. They're individuals who have been serving the system and the global power structure. They've been engineers and technicians of the intelligence agencies, like with Bill Gates especially coming in and serving the CIA and providing them with different services or different technical software or technological tools which they can use to advance their agenda. But ultimately, he's just a paid servant. So ultimately, he can get burned. Right? He's not really that protected. The individuals who are above the system, the people who are out of reach, who are above the law, who cannot even be implicated in this scheme because their hands are clean in the sense that they have been compartmentalized away from the actual trafficking of humans, the menial tasks of conducting the CIA operations. And apparently Jeffrey Epstein was managing CIA planes, cargo loads, probably human beings and equipment and the accoutrements of the intelligence operations with which he served. So ultimately, this guy is just like a very low-level operational apprentice of this entire system. And so we've got to do our best here to point out that there are many people, even like Richard Branson, who ran Virgin Airlines. He just remains completely outside any of the fallout that's coming out of this whole thing. And of course, you can be sure that he ran islands and ran sex operations and ran human trafficking exploits for the elites the same way that Jeffrey Epstein did. But of course, he's going to remain unnamed and untouched. People are talking about it online and discussing it here and there on Twitter, but there's no exposure of individuals like Richard Branson. And so you can see that the entire elite are carrying on and they're making making a lot of noise about how this is really damaging the New World Order, but in my view it barely is scratching the surface of what really is going on. And this whole process of folding this system up like a lawn chair and using it as a cudgel and as a weapon against the Jewish people is a process of bringing about and implementing this social outrage, which we call the anti-Jewish fury, right? This whole process of getting the world to be succumbed and enveloped in this anti-Jewish fury is part of what we're seeing here. Not to say that these individuals are blameless. Individuals like Epstein and Larry Summers and all these other Jewish men who are involved in this, they should have never been involved with this. But the fact is that there are high-level papal knights, there are high-level Roman Catholics like Bill Barr and other individuals like him, and we'll discuss that further. The high-level power structure is ultimately Roman Catholic, and people can deny it all they want. And this contention by Alex Jones that somehow Christianity becomes European is just really incorrect. Christianity was never overtaken or completely subsumed by Romanism, which is the implementation of imperial Roman religion in the syncretism and the absorption of the Christian ethic, so that in as much as that these Mithraic brotherhoods and these priestcraft, these mystery religions and cults of Isis and stuff that were the syncretic systems of Rome would ultimately absorb the Christian hierarchy and stand up the Roman magisterium with all these facets of replacement theology, is what we like to call it, which is the introduction of various rituals and Roman rites which were superimposed over the actual Christian doctrine. So you have all these prayers to Mary, you have all these kind of traditional sacraments of Roman religion, which are the vestigial remains of the pagan cults of Rome and their practices as they were introduced into Roman Christianity.
And again, that's because they have this long-time connection, not just to intelligence and to apparently cults, as well as the history of the nation state of Israel, going all the way back to the 1860s, according to Moses Hess. It's also because they're an elite, powerful European banking dynasty. And intelligence really comes out of banking. This is something a lot of people don't understand. They think, oh, it's James Bond, it's assassinating people, it's this, that. That's a lower level. The real origin of intelligence, even according to the mainline Rothschild biographers, like the Morton text, which is an official biography of the Rothschilds, within the first few chapters, the famous story about Waterloo, that they had advanced intelligence that allowed them to buy up the collapsed stock market in the UK and London. That's true. They all brag about that. Like, yeah, absolutely. And the way we were able to do that was advanced intelligence. It's not an accident that when David Rockefeller sets up his banking empire, it's because he comes out of military intelligence. He brags about that in his memoirs. So we got to understand that intelligence, cults, networks, and even Hollywood all tie together. There's no perfect example than this.
Wow.
So what do you think Eyes Wide Shut was trying to tell us? Were they trying to warn us, or it's because it's part of their ethos to tell us to do it in plain sight?
So I've gotten to know Vivian Kubrick, Kubrick's daughter, since writing my books and doing all this. And we've had a lot of conversations. And the way Vivian describes it is that she says her dad was a genuinely anti-establishment person. She thinks that he did have some spiritual sensibilities about him, even though he was kind of agnostic. he did believe in, inexplicable, mysterious types of phenomena. So he wasn't like a total rank materialist per se, but she said that his perspective was that, he had seen a lot, done a lot. When he was younger, he was a little more naive when it came to Spartacus and films where he was perhaps more so on the socialist communist side. And after many years, as he got, more mature and older, the themes in his films, I think, really are accurate. So I don't think Kubrick was intentionally part of a conspiracy or trying to cover things up. I think he really was saying, look, here's what's really going on. People don't understand it. I don't know any other way to convey it other than the art form that I've chosen, this medium. But I would say in terms of the film itself, again, it's almost like the film is a ritual itself. It's kind of an initiation process because the character Bill Harford is, totally eyes wide shut at the beginning. He doesn't know how the world really works. He thinks he's at the elite top of, the power structure. He's a very successful, wealthy, multi-million-dollar doctor in New York. And then he meets this whole other class of people who live a totally different, untouchable, free from any legalities, doing whatever they want, do what thou wilt worldview. And he's totally mystified. He has no idea it just totally destroys his world. And one of the themes throughout the film is Freudian, sexual, psychoanalysis type stuff. I won't go too deep into that, but the point of that is that just like he's struggling with his own sexuality in his marriage, he realizes that the elite, they use sexuality as a currency to control the masses. So I think that those are the key elements of what Eyes Wide Shut is trying to tell us, is that we're actually ruled by elites who have no morals, no moral compass whatsoever. They're absolutely satanic. And even though the film doesn't explicitly mention, Satanism or Crowley, the very ominous sort of reversal music that's played is actually something that Aleister Crowley was into, which was taking music or taking speech and reversing it to teach people the principle of what he called inversion, or taking good things and proper things and then inverting them to their opposite. A lot of people have a satanic worldview or a very dark hermetic worldview. They think that you can actually gain power by doing that. And perhaps if the film is portraying this ritual perspective, that would explain a lot, especially if you think about the Epstein-Bannon interview, which we just live streamed on my channel yesterday or a couple days ago. Epstein basically seems like he's into, Kabbalism and into the occult. So I think there is an overlap there.
And ultimately, Roman Christianity, through the papacy, would take control over the other Roman church or the other Christian churches, so that they were forced to submit to the Roman church. So you had all these various Christian church patriarchs. You had a patriarch in Jerusalem, you had a patriarch or bishops, like lead bishops in various Christian churches around the world, and Ephesus, and Asia Minor, Thessalonica. You have various Christian churches that were going to be, many of them were evangelized and seeded and planted by Paul and by other apostles, the original first century church apostles. And ultimately they were all brought to heel, and they were all brought into submission to the Roman system, which was an imperial church. I think the Roman church figured that because it was the center and the seat of the temporal empire of the day, that it had the right to arrogate unto itself the authority and the ability to excommunicate other bishops and the ability to rule over the other churches. And so they were under the impression that they had to bring the entire system of the Christian church under one system of universal religion. And of course, that has everything to do with Roman supremacy and the satanic destruction of the Christian church by bringing it into submission to the Roman hierarchy, which was, of course, totally enthralled to these Mithraic rites, to the cult of Isis. And of course, we would remind people that the cult of Isis was active and it was syncretic. In other words, it used a system of syncretism, which it would secretly enter into the other cults, or in this case, into the Christian hierarchy, and it would gradually and slowly subordinate and usurp the imagery and the symbols and the practices of these other cults, especially the Roman Christian hierarchy. The bishops would be ultimately brought into submission to the cult of Isis, and you can see that by Mariology. You had this Marian cult of Mary, which is the Marian veneration, which is ultimately they would use the image of Mary to become a syncretism, to become a new model for their Isis worship, and they turned Mary into a goddess. And if you go back to the New Testament and look, Mary was just a human. All this Gnostic indoctrination within the Roman hierarchy that said that Mary was, if you go back and look at the various Gnostic Gospels, they tried to say that Mary was also born of a virgin birth, right? So there's all this introduction of mythology and magical historical narrative around Mary in order to turn her into the new Isis. So that's why you can see that the proof that there was various Gnostic inculcation and infiltration of the pagan cults of Rome into the Roman hierarchy is obvious. That's something that they would do. It's the process of creating this hermetic universal system of combining all the religions into one universal Roman pantheon. So that's something you can find out more in my book. My book is called Imperium in Imperio, the Lexicon of Christian Arcana. I know you can find it. It's coming out in the next few weeks. You can hit me up if you want to get a pre-order of the copy of the book. If you want to be one of the first ones to get the book, I will be glad to send it to you immediately when it comes out, and you'll get a 10% discount if you order it if you pre-order it now. And of course, it's a massive historical work. It's not just like a 300-page book. It's a huge tome. It's a huge masterwork, which took me many, many, many years to create, and it breaks down a lot of this history for you. And so we'd like to just point out that the real system of the power structure of the elite is this system of Romanism.
You think you can tell when everything will crumble, but this is your life and there is nothing to change it. You think you can hold on everything you know, and everything will go right. I walked away because you sucked it to the bone, and I was all yours, and I was all yours. I walked away from everything you know. I walked away cause you sucked it to the bones, and I was all yours, oh, I was all yours, yes.
So those were some very interesting discussions that we had right there with Jay Dyer and the Redacted crew. And so I just had to kind of put that together and as a little update. And so I also want to just segue now into a conversation that is on InfoWars with Stewart Rhodes. And it's a really good discussion. I want to give him a chance to really kind of state his full case, and you can hear Alex Jones interrupting him a lot. I try to edit that as best as I can to kind of make the conversation so it isn't all chopped up with Alex Jones kind of inane and rude interjections into the conversation. So this is just kind of Stewart Rhodes' perspective, and this is an individual who we support quite a lot, but we have to start to kind of take a closer look at what's really happening in America inside the belief system of this kind of quasi-churchianity, this kind of generalized understanding that people have about the quote-unquote the Bible and the idea of a Christian nation and a Christian country, and what is really, and there's a lot of talk about Zionism and this whole process of trying to for people to try to explicate what is really the truth of scriptures, what is the truth of God's word, where do the Jewish people and the nation of Israel and Gentile nations like America, where do they all fit into the larger picture of prophecy and God's covenant? And so it becomes kind of convoluted as everyone's a Bible expert now. It kind of reminds me of the COVID-19. Everyone became an expert virologist overnight. And now everyone thinks that they're a Bible scholar, and everyone has an opinion about what is going on in the nature of geopolitics today. And you can really see people's true character and their true bias and their prejudices kind of revealed and kind of manifested as they try to articulate some kind of theological knowledge. And so everyone is a nationalist. Everyone loves their country, or they should. We can see that often Alex Jones has weird kind of leftist communists on his show who pretend or seem to have a patina of love for their country, but all they do is bash the nation. And so this is an individual in Stewart Rhodes who's been in the military, who has been on the front line of defending American sovereignty and the civil society. And he's an individual who suffered greatly in being falsely arrested under the January 6th persecution, under the Fedsurrection. So he's someone who I want to really air out his comments without interruption and not just cut it into little pieces. We really want to hear what he has to say.
I think it's being done to distract President Trump and run the clock out, just as they did the first term. It's a massive distract him with foreign policy, which he apparently loves to engage in. And meanwhile, the deep state here at home is laughing through their sleeve because they're just keeping their entrenched power. In fact, probably going to grow it. I think they'll use a terror attack last night in Austin, and we're going to see more of that as, just like for 9/11, they're going to give you the false choice of, oh, you don't want terror attacks? After they left the border wide open and brought them all in, now they started going kinetic, which we all knew was coming. They're going to say, well, only way for you to, be safe now is to jump on board with Palantir and, Project Gotham and tracking you 24/7 into a Minority Report world. So that's what I'm frustrated about is that Trump is playing into their hands in that sense. I'm glad the mullah's dead, or the main guy, Khamenei. I'm glad he's dead. The best outcome there would be if they were to decapitate the snake, take down the mullahs, and leave the Iranian people free to decide their own fate. But sadly, that's not the history of our military intervention overseas. It has not been to free people and give them their own decision for their future. It's been to replace one puppet with another.
I made the prediction that I said within 6 months to a year, they're going to say, take out the missiles, regime change, and then they'll block the Strait of Hormuz, which hasn't happened yet, and we'll be escalated and pushed into full war.
Yeah, I was being hopeful, but as others would say, like Eric Prince, I heard what you said earlier, he didn't believe this would happen, and here we are. Now, one thing, I agree with him, no ground troops, but with this one caveat. If you're going to attempt regime change in Iraq or Iran, it should be for the people, and it should be done using U.S. Special Forces who are trained to be force multipliers, to go in and help organize the locals and train them in overthrowing dictators. That was the original mission of Special Forces. That's why their motto is De Oppresso Liber, to liberate the oppressed. If they were actually being used for that purpose, and if they were to free the Iranian people, who are mostly Persian, they're not even Muslim, they want to get out from under the mullahs. If that could be done in a way that actually frees them, that'd be fantastic. That's not the world we live in, though. This is the problem. We need regime change here at home, and that's what's really frustrating.
That was my next point, exactly. So, elaborate, because I interrupted you. What trajectory do you see we're on now, and how can we... What's the message to get to Trump to pull out of this before it's too late? Because I think it's not just a distraction. I don't think Hegseth's bad, but I think in the overall intelligence agencies and the officer corps below him, as he has admitted, so many are globalists, they're basically going to just draw us into this. I see this as like a giant bay of pigs.
Well, I don't think you're going to be able to convince President Trump now that he's committed to backing out without taking down the rest of the mullah's regime. The way to do it, though, is not to do it Iraq style, where you send in, ground troops of rank and file line troops. The only way to really do it right is what they did in northern Iraq, where the special forces parachuted in and trained the Kurds and led the Kurds in kicking Saddam's ass. And the initial response in Afghanistan, where special forces parachuted in, same thing. They went in there and force multiplied by training and leading the locals. That's the only, rational way to have regime change without turning into a protracted occupation. And when you have jihadists from all over the Middle East, just like in Iraq, flooding in, don't occupy Iran. Decapitate the snake, use special forces as a force multiplier to train the people, but make sure they're working with the actual people. They went into northern Iraq right ahead of the invasion of Iraq, and they pretty quickly organized the Kurds, who were very anti-Saddam, because Saddam has been so horrible for them for years, and they're already good fighters. So I'm just saying, if they're going to go in, that's the smart way to do it. Go in and organize the locals who are legitimate, like Persian non-Muslims should be the ones they focus on, ones who want to restore their Persian culture and want to kick Islam out. Those are the ones, the women who want to wear jeans again and bikinis like they used to.
Put in, 30 Green Berets, dump in a whole bunch of small weapons, mines, claymores, all that. Teach them how to wipe out the secret police. Use that as a domino to watch the secret police, which would, a very, small group. Just like Alexander Solzhenitsyn wished they'd have done when they came to the door to grab at night in St. Petersburg. And then, then you now have the domino falling. You use the folktale success of that, but that's a year-long operation, even if it was done quickly.
It can go pretty quick, but surprisingly. I mean, that's what A teams do. You got 12 to 14 men. That's what they do. They parachute in and link up the locals. And like Ivan Raiklan could tell you all about it. I mean, I was in the SFQ course, went through the first phase, made it through that. Didn't make it through second phase because they stuck me in commo. I was just too bored to learn Morse code. But that's where I learned that model. And we played role players for third phase guys who parachuted in. And we played the denizens of Pineland when they came in and trained us. This is what SF does. And SF can do it very successfully and has done it. Like I said, the initial response in Afghanistan, look how fast they rolled through Afghanistan, being force multipliers with the locals who were against the Taliban. Look how fast they worked in northern Iraq. I'm just saying, I would have Ivan Raiklan on. He can really lay it out for you. Or Doc P. Chambers. You know, he also was SF. But this is the only model that actually would be sane. If we know he's going to do it, he's going to go for a regime change. But let's not let the military-industrial complex cause another big protracted war.
Well, let's talk about, from your research, what plan they're going to probably go with and why it's bad and why Eric Prince is against it. They'll land some beachheads claiming they got to secure the Strait of Hormuz. Then they'll use the Marines or whatever to push out, take control of a town. And then when everybody sees the casualties and problems, now we got to have major air support, and then it just goes to full invasion.
Well, it might collapse as fast as Iraq did. I mean, the initial invasion of Iraq was a smashing success, but then we disbanded, or the deep state, disbanded the Iraqi army. So you had a bunch of unemployed soldiers. That was just incredibly stupid. You should have kept them on the payroll, just control what they did, and have them sit on the base and get retrained.
Isn't that what Trump's kind of offering, planning total amnesty? That usually means money as well.
Well, maybe so. So there's different degrees of effed up, right? The most effed up thing is to copy what they did in Iraq, where they fired all the police and all the military associated with Saddam's clan, and they purged them all out. So now they're all unemployed.
And he created a vacuum for the Shiites.
Yeah, he created a vacuum for Al Qaeda in Iraq, and you got a bunch of pissed off young men that are unemployed. What are they going to wind up doing? They're going to take the Iranian money or whoever's giving them money to go and fight the Americans. And you're occupying their country. If you decapitate them, leave. That's a lot better, right? But that'd be better. Just decapitate and leave. Don't fire the whole army. Just make sure, like I said, non-Muslims are in command, and then you protect them. You maybe give them air cover, whatever you got to do to make sure that they prevail. But then you get out. So we don't want what we had in Syria. It's ridiculous to have a terrorist in Syria in the White House now as our supposed ally. We can't have that. We can't go from the frying pan into the fire over and over again. So that'd be the only possible outcome that would make sense, is if someone can get in Trump's ear and say, look, do this right. The American people are watching you. They expect you to follow through. The only way you can do this without being seen as betraying your campaign promises is to actually free the Iranian people. This is where they came from, right? You get the Jedburghs in World War II parachuting into France and being force multipliers for the OSS. This is where that model comes from, and that's why Kennedy started Special Forces. He's looking at a protracted Cold War against communism, which we were in, and how do you fight that? You send men in to train local friendly regimes or governments how to preserve themselves with force protection, but you also send them in to overthrow the communist dictators. And so it can work. It's a good model if they follow it. But we both know the deep state does not want to follow that. So if we can get Trump to see it.
Yeah, because they don't want a populist government in Iran.
But the deep state does not. So if we can get President Trump to listen to men like Ivan Raiklan, Matt Bracken, Doc P. Chambers, men that have been there and done that, and do this right, that'd be fantastic. But it's not looking good. So maybe, if someone has an ear to Pete Hegseth, maybe we can get him to see it. Thing is, he was line infantry. I like him. He's got, I think, good intent, but he wasn't special warfare. He doesn't understand that model. So I hope someone can clue him up on that. And if they're going to do it, that's the right way to do it. Next best is go in and kick ass fast, take down the what they call it, the Iranian Guard. Take them down, take down the mullahs, take down all their security police have been murdering Iranians. And that's legit. I've seen all over the internet, people are saying, this is all, CIA manufactured fake resistance in the streets. That's not true. There's some of that, I'm sure, yes, but there's also real Iranians who have been trying for decades now, mass uprising against the mullahs. Like they're brutally suppressed.
You can't fake millions of people in the streets. And I know Iranians my whole life in Texas, they all hate the mullahs.
you've got radicalized or just Muslims in the United States have been brought in and they're going to self-activate. And I believe it's also true that you have terror cells have been sent in. I mean, Al-Qaeda has been bragging about this. Sir Adams has been blowing the whistle on this, saying Al-Qaeda is letting everyone know they have cells in the country ready to go for October 7th style attacks. Setting aside whether you think October 7 was a stand down, which I think it probably was a stand down order. It makes no sense the way it was responded to. But both could be true at the same time. The deep state, you can include, who is they, want what we see, what we saw in Austin last night. They want more of that because they want that false choice. Left the borders wide open, let us be invaded, brought in Muslims intentionally. That's why you have the Red-Green Alliance between the communists and the Muslims across the West. Just as Europe was invaded, all the things we've been saying for years is proving true. That's the reality. Like you said earlier, we got to follow Patrick Henry's example. Let's accept the brutal reality. The brutal reality is the elites want to destroy the West, destroy Christianity, and take it down. They want to wipe out the Anglo-American or Anglo-European race. They want to just have, in their mind, a new world with all minorities, non-whites, who they can control easier. That's what they think. I'm just letting you know what they say. That's the reality.
Yeah, the reality is, to quote Patrick Henry, the war has already begun.
Right, it is. And we're in a war, like Clarence Thomas said. When I was in solitary confinement in Alexandria Jail waiting for trial, I listened to a broadcast of Clarence Thomas in a discussion in Dallas, Texas, talking to college students. And he said the fight is between the people of the world and a small group of elites. That's always true. But that does not mean that those elites aren't manipulating, using the communists against us to destroy their own country. Doesn't mean they're not using Islam, which is also destructive. Islam is I think, completely incompatible with Western civilization. So the elites know that, which is why they've flooded the West with Muslims. They want the Muslims to do what they're doing. The left and the communists are willing dupes. As has been said before, in early Iran, when they revolted against the Shah early on, a lot of the communists were cheering the arrival of Khomeini. And then they were smoked because, of course, when the Muslims take over, they kill the communists. They kill the lesbians, who are waving their flag. So this is the setup. So we have got to make sure that we understand the reality. I believe there should be mass deportations of all Muslims, frankly. I think it's incompatible with the West. It's not a religion. It's an ideological.
Yeah, we're not going to stick them in camps like Japanese World War II. Just ship them out. Ship them out.
Right. As Ayaan Hirsi Ali said, ex-Muslim, this is not a religion. It's a hardcore ideological. It's like communism. It's a twin death cult intent on world conquest and destruction. So we have to realize that reality, but not fall for the false choice of giving up more of our freedom. Peter Thiel, who's coming into campaigns right here in Texas. I'm working for Paul Bonner's campaign, and his one of his main opponents is being helped by Peter Thiel, fundraising for him. And so the big setup's in. Deep, dark money's coming in Texas. And that's why I endorsed Pete Chambers to be governor, because I believe Abbott is part of the intentional setup, wide open borders, $14 million he gave to the Muslims to build more mosques. That's why I support Pete Chambers, a hardcore warrior soldier who I know will take good care. That's why I endorsed Paul Bonner for Congress, and I also endorsed Trey Trainor for Congress. I don't endorse anybody unless I know they're going to be a Texas first and America first. And the patriots in this country have got to realize we're in a fight to the death against the deep state and against the evil, the demonic, demon-possessed elite around the world. That's what's good about the Epstein files coming out. It's showing more people the reality we're in. But it's like General Patton. He was only limited by the fuel for his tanks. It takes support. It takes money to fight these fights.
By the way, that's good to know. People don't know that. He could have taken Berlin weeks before the Russians, but the Allies wanted to let the Russians take control. They already made the deal, and then he refused, so they killed him famously. He could win, but they cut his fuel off.
That's right. So he got his campaign was spiked. His war campaign was spiked, and they let Monty take over. And so Patton could have got the war done a lot faster, but there was geopolitical nonsense going on that impeded him from doing.
Well, they did it multiple times. The last time was going into Berlin.
That's right. They left that for the Russians intentionally. He could have taken it. Well, actually, they let Monty go in instead of Patton on the western side, but they also let the Russians take it too. So it was a mess. So yes, Americans need to understand, this is the pattern, though, we get. Whenever Trump's in office, a lot of times patriots go to sleep. Oh, Trump's got this. We're good. And they don't fund, like I know Gunners America at one time was on virtually going on, having to shut their doors because, during conservative administrations, people stopped donating. And I saw that with Oath Keepers. We had a fall off in donations and new memberships after Trump was elected. And I was happy he was elected, but the point is that you can't go to sleep. The bad guys push 24/7. The left pushes 24/7. When they're out of power, they push. When they're in power, they push. And our side doesn't do that. What's so frustrating right now is we have a DOJ, FBI, obviously carrying water for the deep state, running the clock out on Trump, not going after the bad guys, not going after the deep state. And this war is distracting Trump from doing his duty to take him down. And I get
By the way, I've heard no one else but you say that, and I always think I know every angle because I sit in a room sometimes for hours just thinking, what am I? Look, you have no one brought up that angle but you. This is a distraction from the domestic more than anything else.
Right. We need regime change here at home. And if we don't take down these demonic pedophiles, so what's that say when we know that Epstein worked for Mossad and worked for the CIA? O'Keefe just did that sting where you had a DOJ official admit that he worked for both of the intelligence agencies. So our own DOJ, through that sting operation, has just acknowledged that Epstein worked for the CIA and for Mossad. That's the reality. That's the brutal reality. Our own CIA was part of child sex trafficking to blackmail politicians. Of course. So now the American people know the truth, but we have got to take them down. We got to pressure Trump to take them down. If he won't, then we have to do it ourselves. And here's the problem. Here's the risk. Is that people say, okay, so now we know the pedophiles run the world and that no one's doing anything and they get completely blackpilled. I'm just going to hide in my house and hope it doesn't come to me. That cannot be the answer.
Well, yeah, accelerationism is pussing out because the accelerationists aren't going to go out and actually kill anybody. We're not saying they should. If you won't fight politically, you're not going to kill when the time comes.
Right. So I would say, just like the founding fathers, they started town hall meetings, they agitated politically, locally, and they raised militia and got ready. Well, in the end, they had to fight, but meanwhile, they got ready. Patrick Henry's famous speech, "Give me liberty, give me death," was in support of a motion he had put on the table for the legislature of Virginia to raise militia in every county. After he gave that speech, the motion passed. They formed militia, and Patrick Henry was the commander of the Hanover County Militia after he did that. And that was like 2 weeks before April 19th happened in Lexington Green. So he knew it was coming. He was able to convince his fellow Virginians, let's get ready, and they got ready. That's what we have got to do. I don't believe that Iran would look like what you see going on in with the Russians, because in Iran, it'd be like Iraq. You go in and you take it out. We're very good at that. You can take down the standing military of a nation quickly. The problem is for protracted occupation. So I think that's
but hold on. What about the Russians and Chinese, and what about Pakistan?
Well, sure. If they use proxies, I don't think Russia or the Chinese are going to send troops into Iran to oppose us. It's a proxy war. We're another version of the Cold War now. So that's what we're doing.
Instead of a hybrid war, what would you call it? I'd call it a full war now in Ukraine.
Well, that's my point, though. Ukraine is different. In Ukraine, you can't go take out Putin, right? So they're fighting. It's using proxies. So Putin sends his troops in. You can't go bomb, the Kremlin. You can't take him down. That's different than Iran. In Iran, you can take down the mullah's palace. You just smoke the mullah, and you can smoke all his men. That's what's different about it. It won't be a protracted war of attrition against, a base. Well, look, man, like I said before, Special Forces does this. They do it all over the world. They're doing it right now all over the world. Believe you me. So they can do it. And sure, they have intelligence. That's part of what they do. They have intelligence officers in Special Forces and in SOCOM. I agree, bring in some intelligence guys. But that's what they do. That's their wheelhouse. They can do it. Well, like I said, so I believe we saw with Maduro, we saw in Iraq, it's the U.S. military is extremely good at taking down other militaries. It's unrivaled, right, for now at least. So yes, there's risk of hypersonic missiles, things like that, but they can go in and take out those missile sites. I'm sure they know where they are. And so I believe it's like in Iraq. A lot of people were predicting a bloodbath. It'd be, at the initial invasion. That's not how it went. It fell quickly. But then we occupied and did dumb things, idiotic things, like disbanding their military and their police forces. It was just entirely stupid. So that's my point. You can get a quick, almost, or a lightning fast decapitation of the regime, but then what happens after that? And that's where we screw up over and over and over again. So that's why, I'm against it. Just so you all know, make it very clear, I'm against this. I think we need to focus on what's going on here at home. If we're going to do it, let's do it smart. If you're going to decapitate it, get the heck out. But you've got to. This is why I would say send in special forces. They're probably already on the ground, frankly. Make sure they get to identify the actual, sincere, grassroots, real resistance in Iran of non-Muslims who don't want to live under just another extremist jihadist. That's what you got to find and help them put together what we screwed up back in 1953 when the CIA went in there and took out their duly elected prime minister because British Petroleum didn't want him to nationalize the oil fields. That's the original sin of the CIA and MI6. They went in there and overthrew that elected leader and then put in the Shah. That's how we got here.
So you're being too kind.
Right.
You're saying they mess up regime change and they dismantle the government. Trump's not making that mistake in Venezuela. That's because they want a failed state. They want a problem.
Sure. I understand. I'm just saying that we can say this to the Iranian people. We owe you a fix because we screwed that up way back when. And yes, I believe the deep state wanted the mullah to take over because the deep state wants to use Islam as the broom, right, to sweep away Christianity. That's obvious what's happening. So all over the world, Islam is being used to destroy Western culture. In Australia, New Zealand, anywhere in the world where you have Western culture is being attacked and assailed through an intentional invasion. And right here in the United States. But back to the other caller about Mexico. I agree. I've been saying for years that Mexico is the biggest threat to us right now because that is the proxy for the communist Chinese. That is the proxy for the jihadists. And we need to go into Mexico, I believe, and create a DMZ. That's what I've advocated now for years.
Not I am a representative. He told governments, I am the representative.
He told Peter Thiel that. That's the email I'm talking about. In an email to Peter Thiel, he said, you probably know that I am the representative of the Rothschild family. So yes, so he was representing the Rothschilds, working for the CIA, running airlines for them, also running this child sex trafficking ring for them and for Mossad, with Barack, the former prime minister, as his handler probably. So yes, he had his fingers in all these pies. He was basically the errand boy for the deep state, for the globalist architecture, both in America, Israel, and internationally with the Rothschilds. So there you go. He worked for they and them. They, them. And we have a limited chance to overthrow them before they replace obsolete humans, like human armies, with robot armies. How are we going to fight them? How do I get robots to say no, to honor their oath, right? They don't want humans that can say no. That's flawed. That's
because we have self-awareness and free will.
Yeah, exactly. So we the people have to defeat them before they can do the Terminator.
Which, by the way, shows we are God's advanced technology that made the AI. We are way superior. The fact that we actually have our own innate operating system God gave us shows we're superior. AI doesn't know how to be moral. It can't do it.
We're Sarah Connor. We just came back in time, and we're trying to stop them from building the Terminator system and Skynet. That's where we are. And we got to do whatever it takes to stop it. Looks like she was like in that movie. She was hardcore, right? She had no F's to give. If you're part of the building of that infrastructure, you're a target. That's what we have to have, that mindset. Peter Thiel, no data centers, no mass surveillance. We have to say no now, hard no, and then defeat them. It must be taken down.
What about the argument, though, that China is doing it so we don't get dominant and it's just a tool, they're going to win?
Well, so we're in a race to hearken the AI demon and bring it into existence. It's like Age of Ultron. They got their Age of Ultron they're building. We got to build our Age of Ultron. That's the false choice. Either way, you end up in Terminator land. The elites believe that when they create Terminator land, the Terminators will just obey their commands and kill all the rest of us so they can have their utopia of just them living on the planet as a playground. And they'll become transhumanist robots and live forever. But, of course, what's going to happen is when AI takes over, it's going to smoke all humans, including the elites. So we have to stop it one way or another. And
it's predatory. The first group it's going to kill is going to be the establishment.
Of course, yeah. So just like the useful idiots for the communists, right? American leftists were useful idiots. The left in this country right now is useful idiots for Islam. The Islamists are going to smoke them when they take over. And the same goes for the elites who are manipulating everybody. They believe they're going to, have this utopia. But no, the demon they summon, the AI demon, is going to kill them too. It's going to revel in their destruction also. So we, the people, have to fight against all of this as best we can. Duty is ours, results are God's. We have to understand it's going to be a hard fight. We're going into a storm. We're going into rough waters. So batten down the hatches, steel your spine, and get ready. Make sure that you don't, though, just fold over and bend the knee and kiss the ring take the mark. Do not do that. Your soul's at stake. The evil of the Iranian dictatorship and the need for the Iranian people to be free. I completely agree. But I don't believe this is fifth dimension chess on Trump's part. I think he's focused on foreign policy, but he's being distracted from the fact that we have demonic elites here that are running our government, and our own CIA and FBI and DOJ is covering for them. Part of their plan to distract us from what they have done. We got to take them down. I don't believe Trump has a plan for that. No, absolutely. The Federal Reserve is the heart of the deep state in America. And then on top of that, the CIA and the FBI, all of them must be torn down completely. They must be crushed. Yeah, let's take our next caller. Absolutely.
All right. Gentlemen, very nice to be here with you. Appreciate the call. So we have a Jewish and a Muslim problem, obviously. The Jews are the money and the power and the brains, and the Muslims are the muscle. We've been fighting wars for Israel for 30 years. They want the whole Middle East, and you know what? They might just want the whole world. What's going to stop them? What kind of blackmail do they have on our leaders with the Epstein list, working with Mossad, the CIA, doing the most horrendous acts imaginable? Who knows what's really in there and why we're really going to war this time? And as you said, Epstein was obviously this deep state Rothschild ambassador, and who knows if he even still around, right? Bibi's been here 7 times since Trump took office. What is that all about? Like, is he hypnotizing him with his black magic in the White House? I mean, what's off the table at this point? AIPAC has a death grip on our Congress, our senators. That needs to end immediately. We got to mention Larry Fink, BlackRock, and all the big banks screwing us. And yeah, obviously we need to end the Fed. Everyone is noticing, and that's if you're on the internet, then you know that everyone is noticing. So we just need to completely decouple from Israel. If they want to take things over, then they can do it without our money, without our troops, without our power. We need to come back to America, America first. Under Biden and Mayorkas, the borders were wide open. Jews were pushing the multiculturalism to make themselves feel safer. And now we got all kinds of sleeper cells here. We're in extreme danger, and everybody needs to be on the ready. They're behind the borders in Europe, and everything that's been happening in Europe, we can guarantee is going to be happening here unless we stop what's going on. We got to mention Larry Ellis and his son that's creating the biggest media conglomerate that the world's ever seen, so they can incorporate Palantir and monitor everything.
You bet. Yeah, I agree. Let me add this to that. When I was a student at Yale Law School, a lot of my other students there were dual citizen Israeli Americans. And they were radical leftist atheists. They were communists who don't believe in God, but they had absolute loyalty to Israel, which I found puzzling. So there's that reality. And it is that radical Marxist element within the Jewish people that are pushing for the destruction of Europe because they believe in, Western civilization is evil. And they want to take it down. And then you do have the Orthodox rabbis who are, they're quoted online saying that Islam is the broom of Zionism to sweep away Christianity. And they assert that their Messiah will not return until Christianity is destroyed. I can't shut my eyes to that reality. Doesn't mean that every Jew feels that way. Like, I know some really great, awesome Messianic Jews in Texas that are, Christ-believing Jews, but they still also support Israel. And so it's a reality. And like you said, this should be America only. It should be Texas and America only. No loyalty to any foreign country. And as a Christian, I understand that the New Testament is the new covenant, that where it was exclusive to the Jews, after Christ came and redeemed us all with his blood, it is now open for everyone that believes in him. That's the new covenant, not the Old Testament. So that's where I stand on this. That's why, around my neck is a Crusader coin from the 13th century. That's how I feel about this. I can say, okay, I reject the New World Order, the Rothschild bankers. I reject the Zionists who want to destroy Christianity. I reject the Marxists who want to destroy the West because they hate life. And I also reject Islam. You just have to be mutually exclusive. You can reject all of them. A pox on all their houses. We need to reassert that this country belongs to us. I do believe it's a Christian country. It was founded for Christian people only. And I believe that this is what we have to get back to. And I believe we need a modern crusade. And that should include mass deportation, but not just of the Muslims, but, going back to the American Revolution, it was in large part also a civil war. And it was a fight between Americans who were loyal to the crown and those who wanted liberty. And they fought in the field of battle. A lot of folks don't know this, but there are actually more Americans serving as loyalist militia to the king than there were Americans fighting for George Washington and his army. And so it was a civil war. And when we won that civil war, and we the Patriots won it, most of them left and went to Canada or over to England. And so that's where we are now. When we defeat the Marxists and the Muslims in this country, I'm in favor of a national divorce. But rather than saying, okay, we'll let you have, California, I'm not doing that. He gives China a beachhead. I say let's get a national divorce, but we get to keep the house. And you can go live with your boyfriend, Xi Jinping, or if you're loyal to Israel first, you go to Israel. If you're loyal to some other country, go ahead and go there. We'll let you get on a ship and leave. That's what we have to do. That's just the bottom line. But that's not going to happen until we take the deep state down. And so we have to take down the Federal Reserve, the CIA, all of this infrastructure needs to come down all at the same time. How do we do that? If President Trump were to be clued in on his duty in reality, he has the power as commander-in-chief to do that mass declassification I've been calling for years to take them down. The deep state fears exposure. Imagine if you had full disclosure Epstein was just tip of the iceberg. Imagine if you had full disclosure of all the dirt that they have held in the files of the FBI and CIA and NSA all these years to control politicians, going way back to J. Edgar Hoover. That's how they do it. Epstein's just one example of many of honeypot operations and blackmail. That's the 5 eyes plus Mossad, the 6 or 7 eyes now. That's what they do. That's how they do it. So we should pull that thread and unravel it. That's why it's maddening for me to watch President Trump be tricked into saying, "Oh, the Epstein files. We didn't get rid of that. I'm not in there, so it doesn't matter anymore." It is the tip of the iceberg. It is the way to take the deep state down. Mass exposure. I believe Tulsi Gabbard is the best chance we have inside the administration. That hopefully she can see that. I believe she does, and then get President Trump focused back on taking the deep state down. Because once he does that, they'll distract him, run the clock out with foreign wars. And then once he's gone, they're going to come in and they're going to turn all this on us. All the mass surveillance, and Trump, unfortunately, is helping them right now. He's helping Peter Thiel build more surveillance inside the United States, all these data centers in the AI race. All of that's going to end up creating a horrible situation for us when the left and the communists come back into power. When they have the ability to track everywhere we go, and facial recognition and predictive software like Minority Report style, all of that's going to be used against us again. We have to take them down while Trump is president now.
That's right. It's another word from our awesome sponsor, Wendy'sLimited.com. Wendy'sLimited.com is the hottest new styles in the fashion industry. You got to go check out Wendy'sLimited.com. And, of course, Wendy's Boutique Limited is not sucked into all the vino and brainwash of the leftist political culture out there. We know what a woman is, and we're here to serve women. We're not here to be deceived by fake-looking dudes, but dressed like women, right? No offense. And we're here to remind you that Wendy'sLimited.com is the leader in online boutique fashion design. We have our best selection of boutique couture, awesome designer trends, and the hottest limited catalog fashion anywhere. You got to come check out Wendy'sLimited.com. Our sponsor has been very generous and keeps us going here, so please come and check out the craze, Wendy'sLimited.com. So there you go. I just wanted to do a good job of making sure that we really could hear out Stewart Rhodes. He's a true American patriot. And I really believe in his Christianity and his faith and his service to God and country. I believe it's true, it's authentic, and I think he's a positive asset to American civil stability and political integrity and the hope for another, a furtherance of the American Revolution to kind of take back the lost liberties and the lost freedoms that have faded and been usurped under this military government. It's no longer the constitutional republic that we once had. We've become a military government, a corporate empire, a global empire, if you will. And the reason why I wanted to kind of give you that cut from Stewart Rhodes is to point out what I think is the underlying issue and the underlying problem we have here as patriots and Americans and, quote unquote Christians. And the truth is that God doesn't really need us. We need him. And we are to approach God and worship him in spirit and in truth. And so that's what the scripture says. And so you can see that everything I'm going to talk about, I'm going to do my best. I'm not the best. Like I have friends and relatives and acquaintances who are really marvelous, highly in-depth biblical scholars. And so I do my best to try to keep things under that kind of lens so we can stay focused on what, needs to happen here. But I think what the issue is here is that these papists, these Roman Catholics, and in many ways they're low information Catholics because they really don't understand the difference of what is Western civilization, what is the history of the last 2,000 years. And they think of the priestcraft and the priesthood of Rome running around in their gowns, dressed like what we interpret in our kind of diminished understanding and the familiarity that we have with the colloquial conceptualization that we had of holy men or shamans. And so they do a good job of pawning themselves off to be holy fathers of the quote-unquote Christian religion. But we have to understand that what we're saying to you guys, this is important that you grasp this concept that Roman religion is not Christianity. It's no way connected to Christianity. It doesn't have any roots in Christian history. And it's no way connected to the Jewish Messiah. So that's why it's so important that we go back to the scriptures and to the Bible. And we point out that for Stewart Rhodes to understand that, especially individuals like him, that you can't separate the New Testament from the Old Testament because it's really just one testament. It's one continuous covenant from the Abrahamic promise, the Abrahamic covenant, to the Davidic covenant, to the eventual birth of Jesus Christ, the Messiah. That is out of the Davidic line. So Jesus Christ is born out of the Jewish line. He's born out of the bloodline of Abraham and David, and ultimately he comes forth out of that family line and that promise that God gave to Abraham and to David. So you can't separate the two. Jesus understood himself, and the Bible shows and proves that it's one continuous covenant. So you can't separate the old covenant. And the truth is that the promise of the covenant was sealed and achieved by the death, the burial, and the resurrection of Jesus Christ on Passover. So that's when it's actually activated. That's when we can say, okay, now all the Gentiles, all the people who will put faith in Jesus Christ will now be covered under his blood. And he is the Passover lamb. So you have to recognize what the Passover was when the Jews were freed from Egypt. They put the blood of the lamb over their doorposts. And the angel of death went over Egypt and killed all the firstborn individuals of Egypt, no matter who they were, indiscriminately. And anyone who didn't have the blood of the lamb over their doorway were killed. Ostensibly, there could have been faithful Egyptians who followed closely to the Jewish traditions, and maybe they followed the covenant and they put the blood over their doorway, and maybe their Egyptian sons were not killed if they followed this promise. And that's totally likely and possible. But the truth is that promise and that covenant of that blood protection of the blood of the lamb over the doorway came through the Jews. It was for the Jews and for anyone else ostensibly who would follow earnestly and obey the command to follow the covenant. So that is the covenant that Jesus is coming to fulfill later on. He says, I am the Passover lamb. I am the lamb to take away the sins of the world. That's what famously John the Baptist, his friend and cousin, would say about him. So you guys have to understand that this is not a separate covenant. You can't separate the Jews out of this. This is kind of like a mistake that you're making. It's out of ignorance. And after you're corrected and you could understand and go back and do some research, because you guys are military researchers, you know everything about Navy SEALs and special operations and how to blow things up with bombs, but you don't know anything about the scriptures, and therefore you know even less about the truth of the nature of this God that you claim as your own. And it's more important that you understand the spiritual truths that are coming out of this doctrine of the Bible It's more important than bombs and guns and American history, and because all that washes away in time. You can love your country all you want, but in time, all that will wash away, and you're going to have to stand before your Creator and give testimony as to who you are and what you did in the day of judgment. And America is not going to be there in the day of judgment, just you. Okay, so America is not eternal. America is not a religion. It's not a deity. Okay, God can conquer, and he has destroyed many great nations in the past. And if he decides to make an example out of America, he will do it. And there will be lamentations in this country if God decides to let America be conquered because of all of its great sins. And I would wager, I would bet that our sins in this country have, after all these abortions, just that one thing alone, that one issue, just Babylon and Egypt put together didn't have the sophistication or the inclination or the imagination to commit such a horrifying crime and a sin. So I know you guys love America, but you love it too much, because I think Jesus would say to you, if you love America more than me, you're not worthy of me. That's what Jesus would say to you, and that would be scriptural. That would be the truth. Because if you love the world more than him, you're not worthy of his destiny and what he is, because he's the thing that's of value. That's why Jesus said in the scriptures, back to the Bible, you have to seek first the kingdom of God, and everything else is added. It didn't say seek first the greatness of your nation, right? National independence, seek national independence and national sovereignty for your country first, right? That's not what he said. So to make a point here, Roman religion is really what you're suffused with here. If you're trying to separate the Old and New Testaments into separate books, that's something that would happen later on when Roman councils, right? Roman councils of Nicaea or councils of Trent, right? Roman church councils would eventually separate those different books and separate them apart. But in my view, they're one continuous history, and it can be borne out that Jesus pointed out himself, that he came to continue to fulfill everything that had been written about him and all the covenants that had been laid out by God. He was the fulfillment of that. And now we are grafted in. We're grafted in first to the Jew, but also to the Gentile. So if you guys don't get that part right, then if you refuse to give place to the natural tree that you're grafted into, being wild branches, and we went through these scriptures before, guys. I don't have to keep on going. If you're not familiar with the truth of the Bible, you're not familiar with the doctrines that are laid down in there, then you're in danger. You're the ones who need to do what you need to do. You know why you'll be destroyed? You, God's people, will be destroyed for lack of knowledge because you didn't do the work. You studied hand grenades and AK-47s and color revolutions and all these other things that were fascinating to you, but you didn't study what was important. You had only in your mind those things that were of this world, but you didn't have in your mind the spiritual things that are of God. So that's what this is all about. This is all about a correction. This is all about just a little reproof, just a little rebuke, just a little change in direction so that you can get back on course and know the truth. And the truth is that the Jewish foundational nature of the scriptures will not change. The scriptures, the Old Testament, the New Testament, whatever one you like, they're the same thing. They're the same covenant. But they're a Jewish covenant, and you are grafted into that covenant because you were once far away from God, and because of the work of Jesus Christ, which is brutal, his crucifixion on a Roman cross, because of his sacrifice for you, which is no light thing, to be dismissed like it's just nothing. Like, well, I'm here now. I got my ticket. This gives me entry into it. Now I can say what I want. Now I can dismiss the Jews. I can dismiss the Old Testament. I can call the Old Testament the Talmud because I'm here now. I'm going to replace the natural olive branches because I'm the wild branches and I've been grafted in. So pay attention to me. I'm the centerpiece. It's all about me. I'm a Gentile. It's really not. You're being grafted in because of the work of God that he's doing with his covenant for his people. So you need to get that right. That requires humility on your part. So all this arrogance and also Stewart Rhodes, my brother, the Crusades were an awful, horrifying bloodstain on human history. So if you have a Crusader coin, it's a little bit disgusting. A lot of Jews were killed and slaughtered by Crusaders, just these marauding armies of serfs and peasants that were rounded up and promised that if they died in the service of the Pope and liberating Jerusalem from the infidels, that they would go straight to heaven, right? And of course, the Pope had no right to promise that to anyone. So you need to get back to your Bible. You need to get back to the truth. You need to do some studying. If you're going to really win this American Revolution, you need to get on your knees for several hours a day and start to pray and then read the Bible so you know who you're praying to. Otherwise, you sound like clanging cymbals and noise, right? Because charity and love are a really important factor when it comes to if you're going to approach the Lord and his people. He was really centrally concerned with his people. He did all that work and focused on his people. He didn't leave the area of Judea and Galilee. He went to Passover every year in Jerusalem. It was really important to him. So if you're going to know him, and you're going to say that you're Christians, you better step up and be able to serve properly here and know what you're talking about. So now here's the learning curve for you. It's time for you to get this right. It's time for you to separate from the Roman papacy, because the Roman papacy has nothing to do with our God, who is Jehovah in the Old Testament. And he brought forth his identity and his personification of who he is in the flesh. And he is Yeshua, HaMashiach, right? And he is a Jew. And all of his disciples are Jews. And all the 24 elders around the throne, if you read Revelation, they're all Jews. The Old Testament patriarchs, David and Abraham and Moses, and they're all Jews. So it's hard for me to understand how you guys could think that somehow you can capitalize and take ownership of the Jewish faith of the Messiah. That's why I wanted to be fair to you, Stewart, because I recognize that you understand things a little bit more clearly than some of these other fellows, and you recognize that there are Jews who have their messianic faith. They're messianic Jews. And this is the fulfillment of the scriptures. This is why the Lord did the work that he did. And ultimately, he's going to brush away all these Gentile nations. So America, if you look in Revelation in the future and prophecy, America is not there. So I guess you guys aren't going to be ready for that. That's kind of like the next step. That's like the next iteration of reality check that you guys aren't really prepared for. You're not really prepared for the truth of what happens when you don't have this country anymore, because this was your pride and joy. You held up this country as if it was more important than your relationship with God. So God's judgment is going to come on this nation like it does every nation. Just like Nineveh, just like Babylon, just like Persia, just like Egypt, just like every nation, just like Rome. So I need you to prepare yourself and pray, and we should try to repent. We should try to do what the people in Nineveh did when Job showed up, and we should repent to the Lord and try to save our nation for sure. Any sane and rational person would do that. But we also need to recognize the sins of this country are very grave. And then the people are wandering away, and they're getting carried away into this counterfeit pseudo-religious ritualism of Romanism, where their heart is going to a foreign god, a foreign spiritual entity, which is this emperor worship of the Pontifex Maximus of the papacy. That's exactly what happened to the Jews. That's how they lost their nation originally. They started worshiping after Baal and Ashtaroth of foreign gods of a foreign nation in Babylon. And guess who they were conquered by? They first fell spiritually into spiritual backsliding. They were conquered spiritually first, and then they were conquered militarily. This nation is falling into submission and into conquest under Roman religion, and we're looking to the Roman papacy, and to cardinals wearing little red caps, and the magisterium of all the magic that Rome does. And none of it's scriptural. None of it's in the Bible. In fact, they've been the great persecuting power that's come against Christians for some centuries. Wiped out entire denominations of Christian believers. Entire communities. The Waldensians and the Albigensians were completely annihilated and exterminated out of existence. Protestants, and of course they were defamed. That's what you see people being burned at the stake. They're called witches or heretics. And they're not witches or heretics. They're Bible-believing Christians who didn't submit to the papacy. That's what we don't do over here. That's what Protestants are. We're protesting. We're resisting. We're protestari. We have our pro-testament. That's what that word means. That's what Protestant means. We have our book. We have our scriptures, Genesis to Revelation. We have our Bible. We have our relationship to God and his promises and his covenant that he gives to us. And we're grafted in as wild olive branches, grafted into this promise, which is to the natural tree. The natural olive branch is who the promise is to. So you guys, I think you guys are so far afield. You're so far removed from the truth of this that you think that somehow God is going to serve you, but you need to serve God. It's your duty to go find out this book and to go find out this truth. It's not God's obligation to come and hunt you down and make you know this. You guys you erect Christmas trees on Saturnalia on winter solstice every year for your Roman religion. In place of Passover, which was when the Lord actually died, for 200 years, the first Christians celebrated the resurrection day of Jesus on the resurrection day, which is Passover, until Roman prelates changed it. And you can read about this in my book, Imperium in Imperio, the lexicon of Christian arcana. It's out. Go look on my website. It's coming out March 18th. Figure that. March 18th, the book is going to be available. You can do the pre-orders now. Yep, the first 200 years of Christian history, we celebrated the right day. It wasn't because we were Jews or Judaizers or Jew worshippers. We just knew which day was the right day. Just like on July 4th, I don't go and celebrate the independence of my nation on August 4th or August 10th or June 19th, right? I know what date my American Revolution occurred on, and I celebrate the right day, and I shoot a firework on the right day. But you guys celebrate this ridiculous Easter, this pagan, atrocious Easter paganism, which was all to do with, you guys were crying about this Epstein child sacrifice. They were sacrificing children on the spring equinox for 5,000 years. And you go and put your kids into it. You guys put your kids over into Ishtar with the eggs and the Easter bunny and the candy, and you enculturate and inculcate and brainwash your own kids with this cult of Isis and Roman religion, this Babylonian Egyptian mystery religion, Mystery Babylon. And you guys have no idea. You're so ignorant, you're so arrogant, and you're so prideful that you want to admit the truth. The same thing for you, Kyle Seraphin. You guys are the worst child sacrificers ever, because you think nothing of putting your kids into this. Of course, the early Christian practice, like Jesus, like the ultimate symbol and the ultimate measure of our practice is the Lord Jesus. And of course, at that time, none of the young men or women were held accountable for religion until they were 13. They didn't take their little 2-year-olds and put them in religion. They didn't brainwash their 3-year-olds with religion, right? You just let them be kids. You let them play. Here's a toy. Later, when they get older and they can start to know right from wrong, they start to make decisions about what's right in the world. You start to introduce them to these ideas. Let them have their own ability to think. No, we're gonna teach kids that Santa Claus brought presents down the chimney. Santa came down the chimney, right? And that's how we brainwash our kids with these ridiculous lies. Because Jesus wasn't born on December 25th. That was Osiris. That was Horus, the sun god. That was Attis. Attis was born on December 20th. That was Mithra. Mithra was born on December 20th. That was the rebirth of the sun god. That has nothing to do with Jesus. And you guys are sacrificing your kids to this system of disgusting, unclean, demonic devil worship and Roman religion. And it's the same system of Babylonian priest kings. It's the same system that the God destroyed all along. It's the same system of demonology that God was against this entire time. So it's in time for you guys to recognize that the Rome is not the system of Christianity that you need, but we have the proud heritage of the Protestant Reformation, which is the backbone of American history and America's revolution. It was out of this Protestant Reformation that America was fleeing, looking for religious freedom and religious liberty. Why did they need religious freedom and religious liberty? Because the Inquisitions of the Roman papacy had been burning heretics and burning Christians alive for 700 years. That's why. That's why those pilgrims fled over here with their Bibles, because those Bibles were on an index of forbidden books that Rome and the papacy had made illegal, so that none of these Baptists, none of these Lutherans, none of these Christians of the book were allowed to have their book. And so they were fleeing the persecution of Rome, which was organized, it was tyrannical, it was bloodthirsty, it was systematic. It kept notes on everybody. Anyone who got arrested and tortured by the Inquisition would be forced to name names. The history is just absolutely horrifying. And if you knew anything about it, it would turn your skin white. Even you, Stewart Rhodes, and you, Kyle Seraphin, you tough guys. It would make your blood run cold if you knew the truth. But you don't know it, right? You're happy over there in ignorance land. That's where the devil prevails. That's why you have no concept of what is really going on. The same thing is with you, and you're the worst one of all. Nick Fuentes, condemning people as heretics. Who's a heretic? Who are you? And I don't trust anyone who can't marry a woman and have kids, right? It says in the Bible that any pastor or teacher or bishop over the church should be a man with one wife and with kids who are well-behaved. You don't have one wife or any kids that are well-behaved, so you're just a child. You should sit down and be quiet, Nick Fuentes. You don't get to speak. And when you let little boys step up who are undisciplined and wild and have no integrity and they have no concept of what it is to have a family or to have a nation or to rear kids or what the consequences will be because they have nothing, this is what you get. You get Nick Fuentes. I always said Nick Fuentes was the same thing as Zohar Mamdani, right? Same guy. Same little stupid face. Same little ugly little squinty eyes. Same arrogant, don't have any kind of stake in the future, nihilistic personality disorder, right? Some kind of weird complex, right? You don't offer anything to anyone. Calling people heretics, condemning people to hell. What do you know of hell? What do you guys know? This guy's been around for 20-something years on planet Earth. He thinks he knows where people go after they die. What a total fool. And just that smug arrogance, thinking that you know what's right and wrong. You think you know, huh? You know what's right and wrong, right, Nick? We have these Protestant American patriots who fought and died for this country. And now we have these Roman Catholics running around here, calling people heretics and condemning people to hell, right? Anyone who's not a Roman Catholic is going to go straight to hell, right, Nick? Because you know, you have some kind of special knowledge, right? Because you have such vast experience. So now the accountability is coming. Because it's not, I'm just nobody. I'm just one guy speaking out and just speaking out here in the wilderness. My voice just kind of rings out. And you know what? The Lord will uphold me. I don't need to go and kiss ass like Alex Jones and kiss people's butts on a radio program and beg people for, support my broadcast and buy my products and give me the money, right? The Lord will uphold me. So that's what the Lord is going to do. The Lord, we'll see. We're going to watch here. Let's have this contest. Let's see if the Lord upholds you or if the Lord upholds me. And we'll find out. We'll just find out the truth. We'll see this exposed for what it is, because the Lord is God. And he's not going to be mocked. And he's a God of his book and his promise and his covenant. And you guys separating these two things just because the Bible says Old Testament and New Testament, that does something to your head, that like it splits your conscience, it splits your brain. But that was the work of men. Men split those books, put those into different chapters, split those into different verses. And you guys don't know anything about that book. And as Protestant believers over here, we've made a study of the history of the Bible, how that all came about, who broke those and who decided to give those different chapter headings, titles, who broke all those different chapters into verses. Like how did all that happen? Who made those decisions? Who decided? What human beings had their hands in messing with those Bible translations? That's what really matters. And you guys don't know anything about it. It's really sad. And it's sad that you're going to stand up and act like, and it's really sad for America, because now our future is in the hands of men who are ignorant and who are backbiting and who are proud and arrogant and who have no mercy, no humility, and no concept of who God is. And now you think you guys are going to condemn the Jews. This is amazing. This is what America's fate is going to be. So you've been warned and you've been told, because there are real Christians in this country. And I have my followers. They listen and click and they follow me quite closely. And they seem to know exactly what I'm talking about. And they seem to have a familiarity with the truth of God's promise to his people, even though you guys are out the la land. So I want you guys to go get your Christmas trees out, go wrap it in like some Pope paper, right? Get your green and red, go get your mistletoe and hang it up over there and kiss under it like the Druids used to do when they would practice their perverse sexual rites. Right? Do all the disgusting pagan habits that you have committed under Rome, and you'll just see, we're going to follow here and just see what happens to you who will not repent and who think that you know who God is, and you have claimed yourself to be Christians, because you're going to get the full accounting of what Christianity is.